The world around us is hostile to the Word of God and to biblical values, but we are called to be salt and light, to stand for truth in a decaying culture. We are not called to run from the fire, but be willing to step into the fire. God has placed you at this time in history on purpose and for a purpose. Join us as we get better equipped to address civics and culture from a biblical worldview. Welcome to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church. Let's welcome our hosts Alison Furno and Debi Vandenboom.
Today's topic, who controls our states? We have a special guest with us, Darla Gonzalez. She is the grassroots director of AZ Free Enterprise Club. She does many other things. She's an amazing communicator and educator. Darla, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to start out with, you have a very interesting background getting into the process of working at the state level and knowing, what's going on at the Capitol in Arizona, and this will help a lot of people. So talk about your background a little bit and how you got involved.
Well, it's very interesting because I was actually working in a church, a large church in Phoenix, as an administrator, and they come to you with questions about a lot of different things, and they would come to me relating to politics. And what was important was people should get out and vote. Like, I know our history. I know the sacrifices that were made by so many people so that we could vote and have freedoms. And so that's all I kind of stuck with is, well, you just need to make sure and be informed to get out and vote. But I started realizing they're really expecting me to know more than that. And at a church, you can't take sides. You have to just be informative. And so what I was noticing in the middle school was my daughter was I would pick her up, and I'm kind of a history nerd, and I'd pick her up, and we'd be going home from school, and I'd ask her about her social studies or history, and she would tell me something she learned, and it was like, wait, what? That's totally not the truth, and it's not in context anyway. And so I eventually started realizing that she was learning what I called fake history. Yeah. And she was actually, she's half white, she's half Hispanic, and she was starting to become embarrassed of her white ancestry. And that really bothered me because we have ancestors that were on the Mayflower. We have ancestors that fought in the Civil War. We have ancestors that were signers of the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
It's like everyone should have some proud something of their ancestors. Without them, we wouldn't be here. And so that started to bother me. And so I started realizing things were happening. This was in middle school. And then she had to listen to a TED Talk that told her that eating meat was barbaric. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? Because I have a son who's older. I don't remember any of that. So I had a friend at the church who was involved in legislative things, and I didn't even know the world out there of legislative districts. And she took me to my first district because I didn't know where to get the truth, like what's happening. So I went to my first legislative district, and I met my school board members, and I met my city council members, and I met my state senator and my state representatives. Even our congressman was there. Mm-hmm. And I thought, awesome. I can ask them questions and I will be able to discern the truth, whereas it was hard to find the truth anywhere else. So that kind of piqued my interest. And then eventually this lady came into the church and wanted to rent her room for a grassroots leadership class, and I'm like, what's that? And I signed up for it. And I just felt like the Lord was calling me out of the church to defend our Constitution and our freedoms. I feel like the Constitution was inspired by God, and within 2 or 3 weeks, I left my job at the church and became full-time in grassroots in the political landscape in Arizona, and at that time, nationally. Wow. So it was not what anybody expected, but it just felt a pull. And I started off with teaching the Constitution, so I wanted to teach the role of government per our founding fathers, but also what everybody's role is in it. Yeah. It's not just the role of government, we have a role to play. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I started, was facilitating all of those classes and hoping that people would understand just how important it is to be engaged and involved.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And you're so uniquely positioned to do such a thing, having that background and having that understanding of, like you said, that the Constitution was inspired by God and by all of these rights. We were just talking about this. And so that's amazing, because teaching from that perspective really gives people the full picture. And so with that, I want to know, like, somebody that's listening right now, and there's tons of people who are in the same place you were in. They're like, I would love to get involved. This sounds cool. I know I should know more than just go vote, right? But I don't know where to start. So if somebody wants to, and I kind of want to pick your brain on the legislative side, if somebody wants to make a change in their state, how do they go about the process of doing something like, oh, I want to change something I see, like creating a bill? How would you start that process?
Well, all bills begin with an idea. So an idea can come from an everyday citizen. It can come from an elected official. So if you have a good idea, and I'll give you an example. I had a friend who in Casa Grande, there were accidents happening crossing the street from a hotel to a McDonald's. People were getting killed crossing the street. And she went to her city council and she said, we need a crosswalk. We need a sidewalk here. And she lobbied that as a citizen, and her city put in a crosswalk there. So a lot of times we think we're powerless to the things that are happening around us, but the city council is there to listen to citizens. The state legislature, your elected representatives are representing you. They're supposed to be representing you. And if yours don't represent you, then find one close by that is. And toss your idea to them. And if it's viable, maybe there's already something that's been written or closely, they can facilitate getting that into language and start lobbying it at the Capitol with their peers.
Well, and you can also, even if it's not, depending on where your district is, if your district, and this applies to, I think, all the states, the state level government. I mean, there might be some nuances in the way that they do things, but this is pretty much across the board at the state level government and also city council. But what you were saying a minute ago about if your representative does not share those same viewpoints. I mean, something like a crosswalk is a little bit more neutral, but if it's something that may have more of a right-left kind of skew to it, you can go to another representative, or you can also go to the head of one of the committees, right? So if it's something healthcare related, you can go to the healthcare committee chair or somebody that's on that committee. That's all public information on the website for your state legislature, that which people are in which committees.
Right.
And so you can also approach it from that level. So you do have a lot of options to go even just have a meeting and talk to somebody about, this is an issue that I'm seeing, because they want to hear from, if you're on the healthcare committee, you want to know what nurses are dealing with or what patients in hospitals are dealing with if there's a problem somewhere that can be addressed by the state.
Yeah, and
government.
We also tell people they can run their ideas by us. We can connect them. We have relationships with the legislators and most elected officials. So if anybody had an idea, they could also come to the Free Enterprise Club. We could look it up and connect them if they have any problem getting in to speak with any of those chairmen in there.
That's such an important point that you guys are talking about. So the people are elected to represent us, right? Like you just said. Do you think that the people interact with the people that are representing them enough to tell them, hey, this is what I want? You know what I mean?
I do. And I think, like, if I go back to where I was before I knew this whole world existed of legislative meetings, and there's a whole world out there, I didn't know anything about it, I would have not known what to do. And I think that I go back and I think, well, how would I have gone about that? I mean, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a number one important thing is to know is that the state is divided into 30 districts. Find out what your district is. Find out who you're elected. You have 2 state representatives and a state senator. Find out who they are and find out when that district meeting meets. It's usually once a month in the evening, most of the time. And then go and start asking questions, because that's really how it all began. I actually had someone go with me twice before I went on my own because I was nervous about it. So find someone to go with you. Everything is more fun with friends, right?
Right.
So take someone with you and go and start introducing yourself. And I think what happens is only a small number of people even know about these districts, and so the voice that they're hearing is a small number.
Yeah, and we talk about that at our trainings that Alison and I do here at the church about ways to get involved. And that's one of the things that we talk about is going to those legislative district meetings. And if you're listening, the way that you do that is to find, well, first you have to know what your district is, but if you go to your county party website, because each party has their own meeting, right? So the Republican Party has a meeting, Democrat Party has a meeting for that, LD4 or whatever it is. So they'll each have a meeting, and all of the people come in. I mean, people running for county supervisor, running for everything, they come to these LD meetings, especially during election season. But on those websites, you can find out who the chair is. So if you go to your county party website, you can find where those meetings are, who the chairperson is, how you get connected with them, so you can find out where those meetings are. And they're going to be somewhere close to you because it's based on your area, your geographic area. So it's usually not something that's super far. It's not going to be like an hour drive. It might be not right in your neighborhood, but it's going to be close by for you to go to your own legislative district meeting. And same with city council. All of those things are all public online too, because they all handle different types of, if you're talking about a crosswalk versus a school board something or a state law.
And it's cool too, on your voter card you can see, so where you see LD4, LD6, that is your legislative district, and that is what they're both talking about is where you have those meetings. So yeah, that's awesome. So, okay, let's go a little more in depth now. So we have an idea. We know who we can go to, our state representatives, the people that are in our area that represent us. So how does a bill become a law? What happens in that process from, I have this idea, and let's say it's a good idea that people get behind. How does that process work?
Well, I'm going to start off with saying it's complicated, but I am going to try to simplify it. The idea that comes to the representative or the state senator, the House rep or the state senator, they go and take that information to what's called a ledge council, which are a staff of government attorneys that take that idea and turn it into legalese language. Okay, so if the idea is good, viable enough, and they think that they have a chance at getting it through the chambers, then they'll put it into the language that you'll see online if you go and you want to read the bill language. The very beginning of the legislative session, which is usually the second Monday in January, the state senators and the state house have a period of time that they're given to submit all of their bill ideas. So there are two different deadlines, and so for the month of January, you have hundreds of bills being introduced into the House and to the Senate, and then the Senate president and the House Speaker, who are the leaders of those two groups, then sorts through them all and decides which ones are good enough to be heard in a committee, like you were mentioning, whether it's healthcare or military or judiciary, and assigns them to a committee to be heard. So the first step is you got to make the cut through the ledge council, then you make the cut through the state senate or the House Speaker, the Senate president, rather. So if you make that, then it gets assigned to a committee, and then there's usually 9 to 11 people on the committee, and they discuss and debate that bill in the committee. It's all public. You can watch it all online. You can watch it live.
Yes.
If you don't want to nerd out like me, or you can actually go back and watch archives. Everything is archived. So they discuss it, and then they decide whether it's going to pass or fail. If it fails, it's dead. It's gone. And it can be resurrected the next legislative session, and there's some other ways to do it. But usually it's done. And if it passes, then it goes to the next step. And that's usually a rules committee, which is checking for constitutionality, making sure all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. And then if it makes it through that, then it's going to go to what they call the committee of the whole. And that's when both chambers, the Democrats and the Republicans all get in the same room. They discuss the bill. They talk about amendments, and then they take, they take a voice vote, but not a electronic vote. And if it passes through there, then it could go to what they call a third read. All bills have to be read 3 times. And when I mean read, I mean literally. And they read them like at 100 miles an hour at the beginning
like
of
an auctioneer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what it sounds like. But it's just kind of strange language. But the third read is where you actually vote, and then you can make a comment. And those are really interesting to listen to the comments. If someone stands and wants to explain their vote, that's all videoed. It's all public knowledge. And then, So if it passes there, then the whole process starts all over again in the opposite chamber. So if it went through the House and it makes it all the way through the end, then it's going to go to the Senate and it's got to go through the whole process again. If it makes it through both of those, then it goes to the governor's desk. And then vice versa. It goes through the Senate, comes back to the House.
And with those, just to go back a little bit to that, so that process of going into committee hearings, I've been to a ton of them. So over the years, I've gone to so many, especially abortion related, anything life related. I've gone to a bunch of them into those committee hearings in Arizona. I'm not sure whether this is, and if you're living in another state, the process is very similar. There might be some little things that are different, but the basic process is the same no matter what state you live in. But here in Arizona, too, you can go online if you have an account and you can put in, once it's assigned to committee and it comes up on that system, you can say, I want you to pass this bill. I don't want you to pass this bill. You can make a comment as to why on there that goes to them and they see that, 800 people are saying yes and 200 are saying no, or for and against is what it is on there. And then you can also email the committee members and you can go speak at a committee hearing, because I've done that as well. There was a committee hearing related to pregnancy resource centers and the attack on them by our attorney general in Arizona. And I spoke on behalf of a pregnancy center that I'm on the board for about the work and how that was an attack. So you can go in if you have a stake, especially. I mean, anybody can, but especially if you have a stake in whatever's being discussed, if you're a victim of whatever, that this is trying to fix, or you have a story or you have some expertise, you can, as a citizen, go in and sign up to speak at that committee. And sometimes they limit the number depending on how contentious it is. They might say, oh, we'll do 3 for, and 3 against or whatever, but sometimes it can just take a long time. And they'll listen to testimony from people, and then the committee will ask questions. So it is very much, at that point, a public input. That is the biggest public input phase of that bill process, right, is during the committee.
Yeah, it really is. It's
hearing.
called the request to speak system.
Yes.
It's unique in Arizona. It's for the public. The quirky thing is, to sign up, you have to go down to the House or the Senate in their hallway and sign up. And then once you log in you can just log in with your email address and a password. Search the bill from home on your phone, and you can give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Yeah. We at the Free Enterprise Club built our grassroots around this request to speak system because we needed voices. There weren't enough conservative voices that were helping our lawmakers. And they use that information like you're talking about to help leverage their discussions. And so it is really important to me, like that's very low-hanging fruit for a person to get signed up. And we can sign you up, or you can go down and sign yourself up and just give your thumbs up and down on bills that are important to you. And I say to people are like, well, my legislator says, it's not that important. Well, that's a red flag. If your legislator says that your voice and your opinion does not matter, it's time to vote that person out.
Right.
Because
they're working for you.
That's exactly right. You elected them to represent you. And I think that's a person who maybe doesn't want to keep their job would go around telling their citizens that they're representing that their voice doesn't count.
Right. It's like telling someone, that's complaining at customer service, oh, you don't matter, right? It's like, we don't care if you
might as well just say that.
You don't like our service at this restaurant.
Well, and
I mean, it's very similar. They're working for us. And so our input is the most important.
And sadly, not all of them value the opinions of who they're working for. Right. There are legislators that think that they think that they know what's best, and they'll listen to unelected bureaucrats, and they'll listen to lobbyists, and they'll listen to other people, and that's right, instead of the citizens. And so again, every 2 years you get to vote those people out. So I mean, pay attention to their voting record. That's really important, and pay attention to how attentive they are to you when you're reaching out with your opinion about the bill that they're discussing.
Well, and even it provides a public record. So if they're, if you, again, like I said before about, okay, there's 800 people signed in for something and 200 against, and they just don't care about that. Well, that's a pretty big I mean, you can have where, okay, some organization, they have all of their people sign in. And so it's not always accurate as far as the actual public view on things, but it is a good tool, and it does help it does help to kind of have that voice be heard at that. It's a way that you as a citizen can make your voice heard in that legislative process.
Absolutely. It's actually kind of fun.
I think
the
so.
key is you've got to find organizations like your group, Center for Arizona Policy, our other group, AZCDL.
Easy AZ, yeah.
You need some leadership because there's a lot of bills and you need to sort through the ones that are worth your time, and you need a little bit of an explanation because sometimes the bill language, yes means no and no means yes, and it can be confusing, but find someone to follow, and of course you can have your own opinion, but it does help to have some leadership.
And once you do it a few times, you kind of get a hang of it, just like anything else, right? You go down. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years, and so you go down, and at first you just don't have no idea what you're doing, but you show up and you learn some things when you're down there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And something I love about this entire process is so many people out there say, well, it's not that complicated. Just if we could just change this thing, right? If we could just change this law, why doesn't the government just change this law? Well, actually, we just explained a pretty extensive process. And I think that's cool because can we say there's issues and corruption and this and that? Sure. But can we also say that it's 100% in our power to elect different people? Yes. Right. So it's like to say that there's just a simple solution, but we have no power, we have no control. It's just the government's this thing that we just don't know how to know. There's actually clear steps on how we can make change, how we can get involved, and how we can take action directly with our elected officials. And that's what I love about this entire conversation is it's showing that there is a complexity to it, right? So it's not just we sit down and, have a cup of coffee and say, yeah, we're going to pass this one and no, and that's it, right? It goes through all of those things you mentioned, Darla, like that's a big process, right? And so understanding that extensive process so that it is complicated, but that's also what makes it better for the people that we have these checks and balances. So I love that. And that, we should be interacting with our elected officials and making it known what we think about bills and how we want to see things change. So,
and understanding who's responsible for what, right? So it's not like just one person. I mean, we've had this conversation even with like attorney generals and whatever, you and I personally have, but that they have a limited scope of what they're even allowed to do because it has to go with the Constitution. It has to, have precedent. It can't conflict with a different law, right? You have to deal with all of those things. So it's not as simple. People overly simplify it and think, oh, well, you should just change this, like what you're saying. Right. But also, too, on that website, it's really great. You do have to learn how to, speak the government language, which is its own monster. But all of those things are on that website, right? You can see what they're talking about, what bills are in committee, what things are being passed, who votes for what. Who sponsors what bills. I mean, I always like to look at bill sponsors because those are the people who are really pushing some of those things and see what they're doing and who your elected officials, what kinds of bills are they pushing at the state legislature, and do I think those are good things or not? That's really easy to look up. I mean, you have to learn how to do it, but it's one of the easier things to look at to see, what bills they've sponsored and say, okay, if they're just completely radical, do I really want that person in there? Or even if they talk like they're really moderate and that they're I'm your friend one-on-one personally, but then they're sponsoring and voting for really radical things.
That happens a lot, actually.
It does.
I have a lot of friends that I have regular like breakfast meetings, lunch with, and I'll tell them, like, did you know that your legislator? And they're like, what? And it's not that legislator marketed themselves as a radical person, but they're sometimes going with the radical parties and their decisions. And so it's like one-on-one, they may sound very reasonable, but look at their voting record. They are voting for radical things sometimes. Right. And I was going to mention also, if you go to your district meeting, your elected representative should be there giving you a report on what they're doing and be available for questions if they're doing something that you're interested in.
And you're in a room with like 100 people and you can ask those questions and talk to them face to face and meet those people and get your own feel for them. That's really a very powerful way to get involved as an individual citizen.
I would say most of the legislators want to keep their job. They want to keep their job.
Well, and they want your help to keep their job.
They do. They want your help and they want input. The good ones do. And they appreciate and value the feedback. They can't always do what you want. Like you're saying, Allison, legislative things happen a lot of times incrementally. It's not, you can't do a U-turn in a Titanic. And I think sometimes our emotions fuel wanting that U-turn in a Titanic. And it just, from a law and legal perspective, it's just not set up like that.
Right.
Which is probably better. I mean, it because you don't have this crazy back and forth. It happens a little bit. I mean, it can be really frustrating for your average person, and to see, especially when we're looking at how far things have gone downhill, that it does take time to bring it back, because it does have to happen incrementally in a lot of cases.
And I think the bottom line is, if you are seeing laws passed in your state that you disagree with, look at who are my state senators, who are my House representatives, and that's where because it's about the interpretation of the law, right? How are they interpreting the law? How are they, what are they going for? Just like you both are saying. So,
and to get even more basic than that, to pay attention to what is going on at your state level, because so many people that I talk to, so many Christians, so many just average voters, only pay attention to what's happening nationally. They pay attention to what's on Fox News or what's on Rumble or what's on,
and then you feel like
whatever.
You have no control.
But it's also, they don't realize how much stuff happens at the state level, and even those state level things affect what happens nationally, right? I mean, that's how they legalized, women voting, right? They got it passed at all these different state levels, and then it had a case to be a national law. They're doing it right now with abortion. They're passing all these radical state abortion. We have one going on here where they're trying to get this, but they're doing that on purpose because they're trying to get at the state level these laws passed, either good or bad. And then it makes more of a national case to have a national law. But so many people do not pay attention to what's going on in their own state. And that really has the most effect. Those local offices, which Allison and I talk about all the time, but the more local it is, the more of a direct effect it has on your life, on your day-to-day life, and the more input you potentially can have into changing those things. They're so important, and so few people pay attention to it.
It's very counterintuitive, because in the business world, things are top down, right? But in political world, it's not. It is local up,
right?
It's what's around you, and then it's up. But we kind of apply that theory of top down to government, and it doesn't work like that. The decisions your city council and your representatives are making at the Capitol are going to impact you every day. Whether a light rail comes into your town, or whether they narrow a road, whether they, the zoning decisions they're making.
What curriculum is at your school, your child's school, what history they're learning in school.
Even your income tax. Like we were lucky, a couple of years ago where we got the historic flat income tax there, but that could change with a change of legislature and a change of that could all be gone away. But I mean, it's complicated. Like I said, it's complicated, but it's worth it. It's worth it. And the thing of it is we can't be passive. And I don't think God wants us to be passive. I think we honor him when we give our voice. And I think there's a lot of Bible verses that actually substantiate that we're supposed to pick wise leaders, and there's Old Testament and New Testament things talking about our involvement with, and I think that even they set up some kind of representative government in the Old Testament with Moses. Didn't they do that? Like they broke those down into small groups and said, okay, you're going to lead these people. It was kind of a representative government. So I think it's important. I mean, I've always, because I'm a history person, I know in depth the sacrifices that have been made for us to have the freedoms that we do. Right. And so it's very taken heart for me. And I realize that the average everyday person doesn't have that interest that I do. But I have seen people make differences in this state with their ideas and their bills. I've seen them lobby their ideas with their representatives and change hearts and minds, and that is a big footprint. If you make that change in the state, you're changing things for everybody in this state for the better.
You look at just even like the school choice that we have in Arizona, our ability to homeschool, our ability to have ESAs, those kind of things all started as an idea at the state level. It's not national, it's state level government, and that, so many people within the church either have their kids in Christian school or they homeschool. The reason we can do that in Arizona is because of the state legislature. All of that happens at the state legislature, so it's very important, and it could go away in one election. Yep. So those things are extremely important to pay attention to. They really do have an effect.
So with that, I want to get to, we went through the whole process of how does a bill become a law? What does it go through? And you said if If it goes through the Senate and the House, then it goes to the governor's desk, right? So at that point, I want to talk a little bit about like what does that look like, and what are some things that we've seen in this last legislative session with, I know we have some vetoes, which I wanted you to talk about what that means, but walk me through that process.
Yes, and before I talk about the vetoes, there is a process where you can refer a bill to the voters, and so those are called ballot referrals. So you can bypass the governor by if you get a majority in the House and the Senate, and to get a proposition on the ballot, people will see their propositions where you're going to vote yes and no on things. So that is one way to bypass the governor. But when if you do it the standard way and it goes to the governor, the governor has a certain amount of days where they can veto it or sign it. Or sign it. And if they do nothing, it's signed into law. And we do have a governor right now that is known as a veto queen. She's vetoed a lot of bills.
That title.
Yeah, she's vetoed a lot of things. I don't think a lot of them were big surprises. But some of the things that she's vetoed is surprising. It would be surprising to the average person.
Because we have a slim conservative majority, very slim conservative majority in the House and the Senate in Arizona. But we have a radical left governor and attorney general. And so there's odds there. But some of the things,
Yeah. So
some of the things are shocking. I mean, they're just downright shocking. The things that she's vetoed that are and I think people are not fully paying attention to how bad some of them are.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, so we only have a couple minutes left, but I want to go over a couple of them. What are some of the crazy ones that we wouldn't expect?
Her to veto, yeah.
Yeah, for her to veto.
The one that stands out the most, I think, as I watched this committee hearing, was the Republicans came in and introduced a bill that would allow a student in a school who didn't want to shower with the opposite sex to have their own private bathroom, because we've been dealing with transgender kids, boys mostly, wanting to identify as females, and they're trying to protect the females that don't want to be showering with the transgender boys, right? And so they came up with this idea. This seems fair. Okay, let's give a person a private shower. Passed both the Senate and the House, was vetoed by Governor Hobbs. Like,
wow,
why wouldn't we allow someone to have the privacy of a shower?
So you're forcing girls. So in essence, what that means is that if you are a girl and you have a boy on a school team that says that they're a girl, they are allowed to shower with all of the girls, and you cannot have a private shower. You are forced to shower with that boy or in front of that boy. I mean, that's basically what her veto did, to put two, like, yeah.
No, and one of the senators that was arguing against this said, we'll just put up a shower curtain. That was literally said in a video. Can't you just put up a shower curtain? And this is on video, and it's like, wait, what? And this person is a teacher.
You can visibly see my blood pressure rising.
Yeah,
that just makes me so mad.
Well, I just have to be honest with you. Like, when I was in school, I didn't even like showering around other girls.
Right.
Like, let alone like a boy. I'm sorry.
I'm still like that.
I'm not just going to strip down in front of girls like, oh, here you go. Like, I'm sorry. Maybe it's me. It's modesty. Gosh. I don't know. But I sure as heck don't want to. And I know that they're dealing with that with women's sports too, and the men
at the college level,
and these little girls are being exposed. Even in the swim meets are being exposed to. But that seemed like a perfect compromise. Let them have their own private place. What do you got? What do you have against that? So
right.
She doesn't
would seem like that would make everybody happy, but yeah, that's not what they want.
Yeah. The other one that comes to mind is there's a bill that would add a penalty of class 5 felony if a teacher provided sexually explicit material in a classroom. That was vetoed. And it's sad that you have to have those bills, because I remember last year there was we had a bill where it prohibited filming pornography on public school property. It's like, why would you need a bill for that? Well, because someone was doing that, and that bill got vetoed also. So it's like, what's the problem here? And the interesting thing about this bill, I watched the video on this too, is Senator Hoffman is the one that sponsored this. He actually, when he was testifying, held up the pictures of what they were showing, and the committee hearing, the ones that were against it, just about blew a gasket and wanted him to leave. They got all offended, and it's like, yeah, but this is what you're showing students, and
Children,
you can't.
right.
You're showing minors this, but you're going to get offended seeing it. So there seems to be some missing common sense centering around some of this. But it infuriates me. It really does. I think we need to protect our children.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. So kind of to close this out here, I mean, this was such a good conversation on understanding how the local process works. And Darla, thank you so much. That was such a simple but very understandable explanation of that. Is we need people, normal people, to get involved. And we do that by getting to know the local level, right? Getting to know what is my legislative district, who represents me at the state level. And, you know, whether it's going to the Capitol, using the request to speak system, if you're in Arizona, you know, using those, every state has their own type of, you know, different ways that you can communicate with your local level officials. So getting to know those people and making your voice heard that way so they know where you stand. And so you're able to make that difference.
To have that input.
100%. And I think that getting to know your elected officials is probably the best thing you could do. Let them know who you are, and just be normal. Just be normal. They're used to kind of people who are a little more zealous.
That's such
Good
a nice
choice of
word.
words.
You
So
can
nice.
tell the legislators that are used to
I would
zealous
say crazy,
people,
but you know, zealous is a good word.
they're a little gun shy when you walk towards them
I
because
know.
they're not really sure. Like, what are they gonna do?
How?
So just be normal and introduce yourself and thank them for their service and find out who they are, and you'll find that they're just normal people. A lot of them really just feel called to serve, and that's why they're doing what they're doing.
And if you build those relationships with them, they're more likely to respond to you too. So when you send an
100%.
email or you send a correspondence, I mean, we've kind of had the fruit of that here, right? Between you and I, we know a lot of people, and so you get that inside information, or you can find out a little bit more extensively what's happening because you have relationships with people that are down there, because you're not, you know, zealous and
you know what they'll
you're a
do?
normal person.
They're going to text you and ask your opinion on things.
Or I would get texts from a friend of mine who was the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, and she'd be like, "Okay, this bill is coming up. Get people to pray." And so we would, you know, but then I'm getting, because she knew that I was, you know, supportive of what she was doing and had that, and we could call in, you know, either people to send in comments on RTS and to also pray for the hearing that was about to happen. So all those things are good.
If you have a good legislator that you like, help them.
Yes.
Help them stay in office. Be a support to them, and just kind of have the attitude that you're there to support them. They're literally putting an X on their back.
Right.
And
They are.
if you watch these videos and all of conversations, it's pretty amazing. On one hand, you're like, wow, that person's like really smart. And then on the other hand, you think a third grader could do this. Like there are some that are elected that you realize anybody can be an elected official. They really can.
I know.
Right?
I'm laughing
what
'cause
we're
it's
lacking
true.
is some common sense. And I think there are a lot of people
Yeah.
with common sense out there that don't realize that this could be a call for them.
Right. I
Yeah.
agree.
I totally agree.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, Darla, thank you so much for being on the show today. And thank you for listening to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
You can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify and follow us on social media. Find all the info on the show notes. To learn more about Dream City Church, visit our website at dreamcitychurch.us. Thanks for listening.